Welcome to Crash Course. Today we're going to ramble about Assassin's Creed as a series, what games are good, what games are not so good, kind of the bloated and convoluted nature of the narrative. Um, I'm not sure how long this is going to be. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to make it as concise as possible, but there are a lot of video games, so I got my trusty water bottle beside me, and we're gonna just tank this. So let's just start with my history with the series. So I am a seasoned Assassin's Creed fan, player of video games, the whole nine yards. I have played pretty much every game in the series. I have far-reaching bona fides when it comes to my investment in the series, my history with it. I'm about as seasoned a Assassin's Creed player as you can find. I don't know what that would get me, I guess, in terms of marketability. But I know a lot about the series, is my point. So, yeah, where to start? I've played pretty much every one of them, with the exception of Valhalla and the original Assassin's Creed. I've never finished. I've put a fair amount into the original, but I've never finished it. That will probably change at some point, so I'm not completely talking out of my rear end about those games. I want to become more well-rounded in terms of being able to understand the complete breadth of the franchise. So in this one, we're going to talk about, there's a lot of extracurriculars when it comes to the Assassin's Creed series. We're not going to talk about every single game. We're not going to talk about I think they're called the Assassin's Creed Chronicles games. We're not going to really talk about those. They're neat little asides, 2D kind of platformy types with interesting assassins. They're not the point of this exercise necessarily. So what I'm really going to focus on are the main thrusts, and I kind of wanted to be caught up with the newer games before I came here and did this, but therein lies the rub a little bit with my experience with the one before Valhalla, Odyssey. I had a interesting time with Odyssey, and that's kind of why I haven't picked up Valhalla yet, besides time considerations. So I guess to start, played every game. Said that for like the third time. Um, I have not finished every one of them, but I have completed about 80% of them in terms of mainline. This includes 2, Brotherhood, Revelations, Assassin's Creed 3, 4. I'm not counting Liberation. It's not a mainline really. It's more of a portable handheld type. I consider it more like the Chronicles variety. It is a spin-off. It is a smaller title. It's not like the main thrust sort of thing. And this could be kind of the same for, Assassin's Creed Rogue in some way, but that is a full bore console release of it was considered a mainline Assassin's Creed, so I'm counting that one. But anyway, in terms of games I finished, Assassin's Creed 2, Brotherhood, Revelations 3, 4. Um, let's see, what's after Black Flag? Yeah, I've played all these games, but there's so many, it's hard to remember. Black Flag, there's Unity I finished. Did not complete that one actually. Syndicate, Rogue as well. Rogue and Unity were a tandem release. Did they release on the same day? I want to say they released on the same day. For Rogue was for old consoles, and Unity was for the next gen PS4, Xbox consoles. Um, but yeah, those are the main ones until they kind of pivot into a new version, with the advent of kind of wanting to shake up the formula after Syndicate. They kind of turned into, they were a classic third person kind of stealth action game, and they kind of revolutionized it and turned it into sort of it really was, it turned into a third person RPG. It just that's in the Witcher sensibilities and Skyrim in some way. It became open world in the broadest sense, and I do mean the broadest sense, from Assassin's Creed Origins to Odyssey to Valhalla. It became like a new class of their style of game. And recently they've kind of waffled back and forth on what they actually want to make in terms of kind of structure. With Assassin's Creed Mirage originally being DLC for Valhalla and then getting blown out to its own standalone $50 release. That is more of the original style of Assassin's Creed game. Um, and it's you know it's a mixed bag, the entire series. It's really trying to be, I don't know, a lot to a lot of people, and I don't know. It feels like it is the specific Ubisoft game. It is like the Ubisoft game. They make Assassin's Creed games to basically like show off what Ubisoft is doing at any given time. Um, and they're kind of like the experimental sort of thing. They seem to be kind of like we wanted an idea, we're going to throw it into an Assassin's Creed game and we're going to see if it works for our other stuff. It feels like a testing ground for Ubisoft as a company, I suppose. Um, and I think that's why there's so much variety in the games they have made in the series up to this point. Um, Starting off at the very beginning, the series started in the 360 era with the original Assassin's Creed, I believe in 2007. It was 2007. Um, and it's interesting to see how far it's come, I guess, when you think about where it started to where it's kind of ended up and maybe is shifting to. It's hard to tell what Assassin's Creed Shadows, the newest one, is going to actually be. Is it going to be one foot in either pond, where it's some of the original style and then some of this new RPG sort of open world exercise? I wonder. I don't quite know how it's going to manifest. But, I'm interested to check it out. I will definitely check it out. So, um, it's going to be tough to see what it is. But starting from the top, the original Assassin's Creed is is maybe the most experimental of the series, and I mean that by saying it's kind of like the proof of concept for kind of everything that comes after. It is like the template of flavoring, the template of lore. It is the beginning of everything Assassin's Creed, literally. For good and for bad, there is a lot of really great ideas, really cool ideas, really great um, structure. I think the best thing about the original Assassin's Creed, and like I said, I haven't finished it. I have played about 60% of it. Um, a little over halfway, I think I played. It's not a very long game, depending on what you decide to tackle and do. Um, it's kind of like a game without structure. It's like it has a defined path you go down, of course. It's the golden path for sure. But when it comes to how you take down your targets, it's a little more freeform with it, up to a point. I mean, it's not like the most freeform thing in the world, but in terms of attacking a given target, they let you kind of go where you want with it in terms of how you get to that point in either traversing the world or blending in and getting close to the target or using the tools of the trade, that sort of thing. The hidden blade, the sword, whatever you want to use, you can kind of use on a given target. So it's that flexibility that I really like. It felt like a nice, it feels like kind of a clunky sandbox that had improved by the time 2 came around. Um, and like I said, I can't speak to the game in full, and that's why I feel like I'm hamstringing myself a little bit. It's not enough to have played every game except for finishing 2 of them, but that's just how life goes, I suppose. But the original Assassin's Creed, from what I played, I really like it. It's very bare bones in terms of story and narrative when it comes to the meta narrative, because that's one of the big things about Assassin's Creed is that there is a going concern in terms of the modern real life aspect of being outside of the simulation. Um, it's the dressing up of it in the original is that you are this bartender named Desmond, who is kind of like he kind of gets asked by this corporate organization to try this new simulation out, sort of thing. It's even been a long time since I played it. Um, I'm a little hazy on kind of the complete story of the first one, um, but it's basically groundwork for the what became the full kind of main story of Assassin's Creed, because even the assassins' stories are not the main story in terms of lore when it comes to Assassin's Creed. They are informing whoever is going through it. So I guess if I want to speak more on the meta narrative, I need to kind of get into it. So the setup is for Assassin's Creed. There is this company, this corporation named Abstergo, and they are looking to Abstergo is many things, but they are looking to kind of mine the past through these kind of memories of unique individuals to, I guess, glean some sort of like ancient information for the most part of this first civilization. It's hard to explain because every game is not so neat, but the gist is like you're being co-opted initially to pursue their goals of finding out what the deal is with the Isu, this first civilization. In the first game, you definitely don't know this, but as it continues on, it kind of gets glossed in sharper relief um, with each successive game. Each successive game really kind of reveals a card or two. So by the time I would finish the first one, it would kind of make the beginning of two a little bit more clear, I would imagine. But again, haven't finished it. So Assassin's Creed, the original, I wish I could speak to it more personally, and I really can't. Um, the real exposure I have is the kind of meat of the series, and that is the Ezio trilogy. So the first one, you are kind of, it's an intro based. It's like a nice start, albeit a very clunky and you know I feel like it doesn't age super well in terms of mechanics. It's very obtuse in terms of like what you're supposed to be, you know, what your combat capabilities are. There's multiple button presses for different things, and it's not the cleanest thing. I feel like it really gets cleaned up in the second one. But anyway, you kind of have all this groundwork be laid about this meta narrative, the assassins, the Templars, all the basic ingredients of what makes an Assassin's Creed game. It's in the first one for sure. The protagonist is not the most interesting thing in the world when it comes to the assassin portion of it. I think Desmond is a relatively interesting character for driving a narrative forward for the meta stuff. But Altair, the assassin you play, which is his ancestor, um, and you're kind of living these past experiences through his shoes, Altair's shoes. Um, it's he's an interesting character, but he's not a very good one. He feels like very like cardboard cutout. This is Assassin Man. Um, and he's got reasons for being the way he is, this and that. It honestly gets more into it with Revelations. That's why I don't feel like I need the first one as much, because Revelations kind of wraps it up in a really beautiful and neat way. Um, and I'll get into that later for sure. But uh, kind of segueing into the real one that people played is Assassin's Creed 2. Assassin's Creed 2 is a different beast altogether. It is one of the most successful titles in the series. It is one of the most beloved for sure. It is top five for me for sure because there's so many games. I mean, it's definitely top five. It's up there in terms of quality, in terms of storytelling, in terms of characters. When you think of Assassin's Creed as a player, you think of Ezio, the assassin, Ezio Auditore da Firenze. He is an Italian assassin. Um, Also, he is from the line of Desmond. He's one of his ancestors. So the setup, the meta narrative, not to spoil anything really. It's a continuation of the first one. You're kind of leaving Abstergo after the events of the first one, and you're setting up shop with a double agent played by Kristen Bell, which is fun. Um, And it kind of takes off from there. The entire series feels very like, we're going to rebel against this evil corporation sort of thing, and we're going to weaponize their simulation, the Animus, for our own benefit and to combat them trying to claim powerful artifacts to take over the world for the most part. Um, and that's kind of where Assassin's Creed 2 really kind of takes off. After the events of the first one, you leave Abstergo. Um, Meta narratively, you are kind of going into hiding, um, and you kind of have this ragtag group of individuals that are ex Abstergo employees, the people that can actually run the thing. They were in the first one, but they are better drawn in the second one, more realized characters. Um, Fantastic performances all around, honestly. Even from Kristen Bell, which could be like celeb stunt acting, but I think she really does a serviceable job. Um, Even kind of being the face of the game, I guess. Um, but Assassin's Creed 2, it is probably, if you were to ask somebody that has played Assassin's Creed what their favorite is, if they've played a good majority of them, and it's probably going to be either 2 or Brotherhood. You're going to get a lot of those, and some Black Flag for sure too. But 2 specifically is a classic, um, and it is by far one of the best of the series, and I think it is just a must-play game unto itself because I feel like they really solidify what makes the idea of Assassin's Creed so good in the second one. Um, I didn't mention in the talking covering the original. It is semi-open world. It's kind of open zone. Um, you are kind of going from place to place collecting items, chasing targets, this and that. As Assassin's Creed 2 is more focused in terms of a narrative structure, in terms of open world, back and forth, traversal, this and that. It is more like, hey, you have a direct icon to go to this icon. And there are side missions and extracurriculars to do along the way to each mission, and there are open zones. But it's a far more structured, more complete version of what Assassin's Creed 1 was trying to be. Um, I think it's just a better game personally, and I think that's probably why I haven't finished the first one. It feels a little too rickety, the first one. Um, and the characters just aren't as interesting as in Assassin's Creed 2. Immediately, you are met with Ezio. Um, the first thing you see in Assassin's Creed 2, and it's kind of one of the most iconic moments about it, is he gets into like a street fight with like his pissy street gang rivals, I guess, or house rivals. He's kind of like a rich pretty boy Ezio, before he becomes an assassin, and he kind of gets into a street scrap, and it really shows you like he's kind of a bare knuckle brawler, and in comparison to Altair, which is kind of this sneaky monk. It's really fascinating to see like the difference in character. He's kind of brash. He's a womanizer. He's very witty. He's very quick. He just feels like a more, I don't know. There's a certain verve to his character, um, where Altair kind of like is a character of nouns. Ezio is like a character of verbs. He is action manifest. Everything he does has an impulse, has a feeling, has a heart to it. I really like Ezio. He really feels like the assassin. When you think of assassins in Assassin's Creed, it's Ezio. Um, and it's kind of evident they made 3 games with him. The third one is split semi between him and Altair, for which I will get into later. But in Assassin's Creed 2, he is the guy, and it's kind of like the rise. It's kind of like the fall of his family and the rise of him as an assassin. Um, and the story is genuinely tragic. I don't want to spoil it here because I think it is definitely worth playing even now. The Ezio Collection, Assassin's Creed Ezio Collection, contains 2 Brotherhood and Revelations, and I think they are well worth playing. They are light touch remasters, for the PS4 and Xbox One series of consoles. I think that it came to Switch, and it's not the best on there, but it's of serviceable quality. It feels akin to the original 360 and PS3 versions of those games, which is fine. It's totally fine. Um, but they're higher frame rate and they run better in on the PS4 and Xbox One versions. So um, that's the best way to play those games for sure. But getting into Assassin's Creed 2 and what I think makes it so great are the characters and the story. They really understand what makes it work. They have kind of three tent poles that I think they plant their flags on, or kind of build their house on, their tent, whatever you want to call it. The first is the meta narrative is stronger than it was in the first, and you really do care about the characters as much in the Animus, the simulation, as much as the outside. It feels like each side is as important, and it kind of gives you a reason to kind of hop around because there are some things to do around the mansion that you're at, or the not the mansion, the kind of like loft you're in the second one, and the in Florence and Italy and the Animus. There's like enough to do on each side and enough interesting conversations to be had with your crew, the Animus crew, and honestly they're called the Assassins. Your ragtag band. They're like covert agents basically. They are assassins like modern day assassins. All three of them. And yeah, they kind of like have been stabbing Abstergo in the back by absconding with you and an Animus basically pod. Um, but the two prongs of this game to think of the reason I think it's so successful is really the stories on both ends, the meta narrative, the Animus narrative as well with Ezio, his struggles, his rise, his fall and rise of his family, and himself, and kind of like the villains are really good. The moment to moment gameplay is really tight, really satisfying. The thing that I like about original Assassin's Creed, this style, this version of game, this kind of third person stealth style game is they they really get like the combat right, and I feel like they got away from it later, where it's kind of like a counter based engagement affair when it comes to fighting enemies. So the setup is you have kind of like your stock standard. You can kind of run, you can kind of jump, climb walls like you could in Assassin's Creed One. Um, and when you get into a scrap in a fight, you have more tools at your disposal than the original. You have I think you can get multiple swords. I think you even can you get a gun in the first one? I can't remember. Um, but there's like caltrops. There's different kind of assassiny things he can use. His hidden blade is a very powerful tool. It's kind of like the staple of Assassin's Creed protagonists are these hidden blades that they keep sheathed in their gauntlets or wrists. Um, and kind of the most interesting part about the hidden blade is that there's a ceremony involved when you become an assassin that you must cut off one of your fingers, a specific finger. I think it is the second from your pinky finger. You have to cut it off to kind of, make room for this hidden blade to kind of spring. Um, it's more of a ceremonial thing. You can kind of live without doing that, but it's become like a thing to be a nine-fingered assassin. People do it, and it's kind of like taboo if you don't. So like in later games, for instance, like Edward Kenway from Black Flag doesn't. I don't think he does it because he's kind of a fraud. Not really get into it, but he's kind of a fraud and he kind of co-ops an assassin's gear, so he's not obviously cutting off his finger in the traditional sense. But anyway, I don't want to stray too far from the original, the second one. Um, but Assassin's Creed 2, top to bottom, I think is a better game than the first. The open world is more interesting. There's more to collect, more to do. This is one of the games I have 100%ed. I've on PlayStation, I have platinumed it, which is getting 100% of the trophies and getting a full, percentage on that. It would be kind of 100% achievements on Xbox in that sense too. Um, I've it's not even the first time I've done it. I did it on the original 360 release too, Assassin's Creed 2, and I don't know, just there's something timeless about it. I think a lot of it has to do with the score. I think the Jesper Kid score is just it's an all-timer. It's just an all-timer score. I think it's just immaculately produced, written, edited. Every bit of it is just it's nostalgic and takes me back to playing that game for the first time. Just I'm someone that if a game is purely like mechanics based, I can kind of put on a podcast or listen to music. I'm not so precious about hearing everything a game has to offer, with some exceptions for sure. Assassin's Creed is one of those. Um, the music is usually pretty good, to just listen to, and it kind of changes and morphs in different ways as each release kind of comes out. But I feel like two really, really nails it. Jesper Kid is known for some of the Hitman soundtracks as well, the original ones. I think he did Assassin's Creed One and Brotherhood, and then Lorne Balfe took over for Revelations. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but that feels right. I think we're gonna go with that for now. I'm sure I will get some corrections about this later. Um, but yeah, I think the music just ties it together in a beautiful package. It's Renaissance era Italy, I believe, um, and you're kind of running around and doing odd jobs, kind of becoming this deadly killer, seeking the revenge of your family. Um, and it's a very kinetic story. It's a very impactful story. The character work is fantastic. I think Ezio is one of the most vibrant and interesting characters in any video game, especially in the Assassin's Creed series. He stands apart from almost everybody else in terms of protagonist, save for one, which I'll get into at some point. Um, but Assassin's Creed 2, if you're gonna play any of them first, play 2. I truly believe this. Like, if you want to see the history of it, play the first one. That's great. But two is really where the series takes off and becomes a identity to itself. It was an extremely successful game, extremely popular game. A lot of people played it and loved it. Um, but yeah, if you're gonna start anywhere, start with Assassin's Creed 2. You will not regret it. And if you want to play the Ezio trilogy, I recommend it. So segueing from two to Brotherhood now, Ezio kind of like it's his like sophomore effort, pretty much. It's his kind of Spider-Man 2, we'll put it that way. He's not as young as he was. He's not as you know brash as he was, but he's just as deadly and just as interesting. I feel like Brotherhood might have the best story in the series. Um, Besides Origins, I think Origins is really takes the cake. I think Origins has one of the best stories in any video game. So Brotherhood is like top for sure. The entire Rodrigo Borgia saga and the kind of the Pope entering the picture after the events of two, it really takes off. It feels epic. It feels like an epic crime saga from two to Brotherhood. I think Brotherhood is largely the same game in terms of structure as two. Some of the same characters. Ezio is better than ever. He is maybe at the peak of his powers here. He's like Ezio Prime in this game. And it takes place in Rome, Italy. Um, and it's a slightly bigger game, I believe, than two proper was. And in some ways that can be bad, but I think on the whole, it doesn't end up feeling too overstuffed. It feels like they added the right things, took away some things, made it better in some ways, and added little mechanical differences. Like, for instance, you get a horse in Brotherhood, which is nice for getting around. The times you use it, though, very few and far between. But in some of the times in the Roman countryside, you are kind of going from place to place on your horse, kind of across this like rugged prairie of old Roman structure. Um, and I think it's it is a cleaner effort than even two was in terms of polish. I think it runs well. It's beautifully composed and directed. I think the writing is really strong in it too. Two had some in some ways has some really silly line reads for the time. Like for instance, there's a uncle character you meet. His name is Mario, and he does the whole "It's a me Mario" thing, and I find that extremely cringy every time I think about it. It can be fun, but I think I'm just so overexposed to the series. When I think of the old games, I just can't help but think of that line read and go like, "Oh my God, whatever." So, um, anyway, that's kind of a aside, but Brotherhood is better in almost every way than two. I think it. I personally, in terms of nostalgia, I prefer two, and I think a lot of it has to do with the soundtrack. I think the Venice rooftop chase scene is just like, oh, it's mint. If I can link it to this, I might later. If not, just kind of listen for yourself. Assassin's Creed 2 is one of those few soundtracks that you can just play anytime and it's going to be good. It's one of those few things that is going to stand up as a listenable piece of music for you. It's not going to be something that you just move on from necessarily. Um, Brotherhood has some good parts to its music. But I think the strongest part of that game for sure is the writing and story. I just think everything to do with Rodrigo Borgia and his crime syndicate is just fantastic. He's like a petty, disgusting, idiosyncratic villain who really hates Ezio, and Ezio hates him. And I love that. I just love how they kind of have a hard on for each other. It's kind of a crass way to say it, but they really don't want anything to do with each other. Um, and there's really good twists and turns along the way. It's honestly been a long time since I played Brotherhood, but I remember being extremely satisfied with the end of it. Um, in short, Brotherhood is even better than two. I don't think you can play Brotherhood though without two. It is kind of like Godfather one and two. It's just they go together like peanut butter and jelly. You kind of have to do a double feature of it. And then by the time you're done with Brotherhood, you might as well just play Revelations. So it's kind of the best way to do it is to play that collection. Um, Brotherhood is just it's a better game in every way in terms of structure, in terms of combat, in terms of adding newer mechanics. Um, I think they added some of the catacomb stuff where there's like extracurricular like city things you can do um, to like get these new. Uh, it's kind of like these secret. How do I explain it? They're kind of secret uniforms or secret assassins gear, I guess. Um, it's kind of it's an interesting thing that I think Revelations does beautifully too, where they just like incentivize you by doing this large kind of fetch questy side quest where you're trying to collect this amount of thing and you get this cool suit for doing it. And I think two does that a little bit, but Brotherhood in Revelation specifically, and further, it's successive franchise do this as well, where they reward your hard work by giving you something cool to wear. So I really like that about Assassin's Creed Brotherhood. Um, like I said, can't play without two. You should play two first, and then play Brotherhood. But Brotherhood has one of the strongest writing and story in the series, and I think it's definitely worth a look at if you finish two. If you haven't finished two, just don't play it. I mean, you're not going to understand what's happening. You could definitely come at it fresh. I just don't think you're going to get that much out of it, personally. Um, so so far we've covered one, two, and Brotherhood, which is basically three, but it's not three. They kind of once they got to two, they kind of branched off and did Ezio for a while, which I'm not complaining. I love Ezio. I hope they honestly, I wish they would make another one. It doesn't make any sense to do it. It really doesn't. But for me, it's just I would love it personally just to see him again. I don't know. It's kind of a dumb, selfish thing to think. Instead of a new thing, I would want an old thing. But that's kind of what Disney does. It repackages your nostalgia to you, and I kind of would want that from Ubisoft because I love those early games. Um, but kind of finishing off that Ezio trilogy is, I love two. I love Brotherhood. I think Revelations is my favorite of the three. And I might have said two is my favorite, maybe just in talking about this, but truly, I kind of waffle between two and Revelations, and I think Revelations usually takes the cake for me. And I think it's because it feels like it's not that applicable now because it came out before, but it's like you know, Logan, the movie Logan, like Wolverine. It's this isn't the greatest thing to compare it to, so just don't hate me for it. But it feels like an old dog still doing the same tricks and kind of being world weary because of that. Um, I don't know. It feels like a really good meditation on age and your place in the world and kind of like your legacy in a given spot. It feels like Ezio is a wiser, more methodical version of himself. He is a far cry in terms of how he acts um, now in this older version of himself. He's about, I think this is 20 or so, 15 or so years after. Oh damn, it might be 30 or so years after the second one. I think he's like just 20 something in the original Assassin's Creed 2, and then by Revelations he's got to be like 50, 55, 60. I mean, he's right there. Um, so he's kind of lived this full life, by the time he reaches Revelations, and he kind of comes out of retirement a little bit. He's well known, well regarded in terms of, I gotta stop saying in terms of, people like Ezio, um, and he has this really big legacy that he's dragging behind him. He is well known, very beloved and revered. He's kind of, the setting of Revelations is Turkey, um, and he's kind of going there to get a fresh start um, after a kind of a long time of being away. And I forget what the actual initial push for him to move to the setting is. I would have to brush up on that. But anyway, he goes to Turkey and he wants to connect with the Assassins network there in Turkey, and he's kind of like met at these docks by this like gregarious assassin, Turkey assassin. I forget his name. He was a great character, but you know I don't remember the name, so it's not going to do anybody any good. But if you played it, you would see him immediately. Is it Yusuf? It might be Yusuf. I think that's his name. He's a cool guy. Um, you know, he wants to establish himself in kind of a new area and kind of see what's going on with the Turkey network of assassins. It's not as strong in terms of meta narrative. It feels like it's kind of spinning its wheels a little bit. It's it's hard to explain without talking at length about what happened in Brotherhood 2. But basically, like, Desmond in the metagame is spinning his wheels mentally, where he is trying to access the memories of another Abstergo employee. And you're kind of like, it's kind of the worst part of the game, honestly, but you're doing these like first person platforming sequences in the metagame to kind of get at the information that you're trying to understand. I don't know, like even when you find out what happens, it is kind of useless. It's more of a segue into Assassin's Creed 3, which is kind of like the end of the Desmond story. It feels like it's, the middle. It feels like Assassin's Creed 2.8. That's the best way I can put it. In terms of the Desmond narrative, I think it is the weakest part of that game. And the first person sequences, it feels kind of like Portal in the way, especially in terms of the weight of your character, the first person nature of it. It's not great. It's kind of like Portal test rooms you're kind of jumping around in for the Assassin's Creed Revelations stuff. And the stuff that you do in the the Animus kind of reflects back on the whole first person test room aspect of it and finding out about Desmond's past and all that. And it's just not that interesting. It's not that well defined, and it's not written very well specifically. I think, what's his name? I think it's Subject 17, I think is his name. Subject something. Um, the kind of like main foil for Desmond in the metagame layer kind of sucks and is lame, and he kind of he's one of those characters that feels like he's smarter than he is. He posits that he's smarter than he is. He's like, "Oh, I know all this stuff going on. You only wish you knew." And hey Desmond, how you doing, buddy? You're a subject just like me. This and that. And it's just, I don't know. It's tiresome. I find 17 to be extremely annoying. Um, so is it Subject 16? I don't know. No one really cares, honestly. I think ultimately it's the weakest part of that game. So it's whatever. The most amazing part of that game is the Ezio Capper is fantastic. It is the best. It is the best part of the crescendo that is Ezio's story, besides Brotherhood's peaks. It feels like the downslope of a tired assassin in the best way. The way he goes out is a timeless thing. Um, the thing I mentioned earlier is that it kind of splits into two. It's a two character story. You're talking in letters to, I think it's your sister, and it kind of flashes back and forth between Ezio's story and Altair's kind of hidden story, as he reached kind of his like end of days too. And I don't know, I feel like it's a mature. It feels like it's a more mature distillation of young characters that they introduced in the original and Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood. It just feels like it's almost a reclamation project of Altair as a character too, who is not interesting. It becomes even more interesting in Revelations, where kind of like he, after the events of the first one, he is kind of the guy, the Assassin's Creed like I don't know. I don't know. I don't even know what you call them. The mentor. Yeah, mentor. They call them mentors. He becomes like the mentor for the Assassin's Creed Guild in is it Jerusalem? I can't remember. Um, in his country, um, or city state, whatever you want to call it. But he's like the guy. He's like in charge of everything, and his network kind of gets brought down from within, and it's a really interesting story to see where he ends up. It feels kind of like Ezio and Altair are kind of running the same course without knowing it, and the final like I don't know, the final scene of both of them is just so powerful. Not to get into too many spoilers, but obviously by the time Ezio comes around, Altair is long, long dead. But um, and this isn't even where Ezio dies necessarily. Ezio encounters Altair in like this library. The whole search of this game ultimately has come down to you as Ezio, as this character, trying to find this secret library. And that, honestly, that might be the main crux for why he came to Turkey in the first place. Honestly, can't remember. It's been about half a decade since I played these games, but I think that's what it was. He's kind of searching for this lost library, and it turns out Altair kind of like locked himself in there and died when he became older. And there's this really, really brilliant sequence in in Revelations where you are an old Altair um, returning to your kind of convent as this old man, kind of infiltrating the order after it's been co-opted or taken over, revolted by one of your lessers, one of your learners, whatever you call it. I forget what his name is. There's so many names, so many proper names, so many vowels, so many. Ugh. There's just so much Assassin's Creed stuff. It's hard to keep straight some days, and it's late right now. Um, but anyway, uh, he has this great part of the game in Revelations where he kind of just goes like kind of quiet storm where he is carrying an apple of Eden, an Isu artifact, and just kind of lays waste on people to try to get to his final destination. It's a beautiful story. I think it really ties up the Ezio stuff neatly. The one thing I feel like it's lacking is that it's not Ezio's true story end. That comes in the Assassin's Creed Embers feature, not film, but feature length um, animated project. That's where he technically perishes. It's fine. I don't like Embers. It's not really like pertinent. I mean, it's pertinent in the way that like if you care about Ezio, you'll probably watch it. It's very old. It kind of looks dated now. I kind of think of it as like um, a Final Fantasy VII. It's like one of those. It's like that movie they made where they made it with the time that they had or the technology they had for the time, but it hasn't aged beautifully like at all. Advent Children has just not. aged really well at all. And so like some of the characters kind of look funny. There's this weird kind of Vaseline look to it. That's what Embers looks like. Um, it's a fine movie. They bring back the main the main voice actor Roger Craig Moore or something like that, who's great. He also plays Sonic the Hedgehog, which is funny, and many other things. But um, Ezio, the entire story, top to bottom, from two to Brotherhood to Revelations, that's the real end of Ezio as an assassin and as a character. Embers kind of stokes that a little bit more. Just kind of a last ditch effort to say like, hey, Ezio still kind of got it, whatever. But it's the real true end of the story is um is Revelations for his character in terms of the full narrative of Assassin's Creed. So from there, we kind of dovetail into the most complicated game in the series when it comes to talking about it, when it comes to playing it. Everything about it is so odd. Um, Assassin's Creed 3 takes place in colonial times in America, which is really cool. I think the setting is fantastic. I wish they did more with it. That's my problem with it. One of my main issues with Assassin's Creed 3 is the setting is so good. It's so fantastic. They couldn't make a good game in it. I think everything to do with like this historical nature of it. So every game, is in a certain time period. And there's different characters you meet along the way in terms of historical characters. Like you meet Leonardo da Vinci. He's like your gadget guy in Assassin's Creed 2 and Brotherhood and all that. And in the first one, there's some characters here and there. But, 3 was like the cameo corner for historical characters, to be honest. So, Assassin's Creed 3, how do I even talk about it? It's tough. It's the game I wanted to like the most, but I ultimately didn't really like it at all. And it's weird because I completed it, like all of it. And that's kind of like the running theme with most of these games I finish is when I play an Assassin's Creed, I try to finish them because they are easy, fun games to complete. And they're good podcast games ultimately to just kind of get everything in. So by the time the story is done and you don't have to worry about, you know, any going concerns, you can do the assassin's missions and pick up the flags or whatever you want to do. All the little tchotchkes and fiddly bits around you can collect, and it's just fine. Um, I think Assassin's Creed 3 is messy. It's just a messy video game. It it promised to be the end of the Desmond story or like the narrative that they built up, and by the time you get to 3, the meta narrative is kind of revolving around the world ending, because of course it is, and it has to do with the Isu being warned that like everything was going to get destroyed, their entire way of life, everything, and there's like this rogue Isu that is trying to destroy everything and come back in a big way. Um, and 3 is like the meta narrative of that is the most interesting of the meta narratives for sure because it's kind of the end of something. But the execution I find relatively lacking because from here it's kind of a pivot point for Assassin's Creed in terms of the meta narrative. It's like the end of like the big thing they've been trying to set up and pay off for 2 to 3 games at this point. But by the end of it, it's kind of done, and then they don't replace it with anything interesting in the future because after this, they just continue to talk about the meta narrative in really weird ways, and they don't ever commit to anything. And it's kind of a major problem I have with the series as a whole, after 3. Um, but 3, the meta narrative is pretty strong. Um, and Desmond as a character, while not always great and not the most interesting guy of all time, he does white dude protagonist things and it's fine. But it could be better. I think that the end of the Desmond story is kind of lackluster, but the journey to getting there I think is really good. So I think it's worth seeing. But like I said, with the new games they don't kind of pivot off of that and do anything worthwhile. But the stuff I want to talk about is not necessarily the metagame stuff. It's just basically all you need to know is that it's the end of the Desmond story, and the end, and I mean the end in terms of like a world conflict thing. It's the most epic. It's the most big budget. It feels like a AAA video game. Like you're even doing you so the Desmond has basically gone to the Animus to get equipped. He's like playing in the shoes of these protagonists, these assassins, to kind of get equipped to, be an assassin in the real world. And the promise was, and kind of the idea from Alex Hutchinson and all the main creative leads on Assassin's Creed was that like, hey, at some point we're probably going to make Desmond like the guy, and he's going to use everything he's learned in every successive game because at this point you've only been playing Desmond, and he's played, two, long running ancestors of his or assassins. He's trying to basically take their skills and what he's learned in the Animus, basically, um, and bring it to the real world to combat the, Abstergo, which ends up being the Templars. Not a huge spoiler. You kind of figured it out in the first one. Um, but he, the stuff that is interesting is the meta narrative, but the thing that should be the most interesting is the Assassin's Creed story. Like the actual story in the Animus should be the most interesting thing. But like I said, it's so messy. It's so messy. The game doesn't even start for like 10 hours because you're playing a different character than the guy on the box. Like, so with every Assassin's Creed, every setting, there's mostly a different assassin, different character you play. And this one you play as Connor Kenway, who is ancestor to, or is he a descendant? Yeah, he's a descendant of Edward Kenway, I should say, in Black Flag, which is the fourth one, because Edward Kenway comes before Haytham Kenway, his father, whatever. The issue is you play as Haytham for like 10 hours, and you're like, okay, where's this game going? The Haytham stuff is good, but it's very guided. It's very like point to point. Um, I think the performance of Haytham is really good, and the story revolving around him is great. And it kind of like gives you two sides of the same coin, where you realize he's a Templar doing all this chicanery, and by the time you get to Connor, he's kind of like, he's resentful of the father he doesn't know, and he turns out to be a Templar too. So none of it's good, basically. Um, but yeah, Haytham, you play as him for like 10 hours. There's a really great opening sequence where he's like doing an Abraham Lincoln style assassination in a theater, which is kind of cool. And not the assassination part. Like that's a tragic thing to have happened in American history. But in terms of the game, like the ways it was inspired, it's a cool concept to kind of pull off in a video game. And it feels very American, I guess, American history, because you are in colonial times. So um, it just the game takes forever to get going. Once you get going, the protagonist they offer is just not interesting. He's the dullest, the most lame, the most boring protagonist you can ask for. Like he's just like not good. I think Connor could have been like the coolest character ever. I think the performance is really what does it for me. I don't think the performance is good in terms of voice acting, and what they have Connor do is just not interesting or fun or good. And I just don't think the voice performance is up to snuff, especially in scenes with Haytham, his father. Um, the whole thing is like Haytham gets this local Native American woman pregnant, obviously, because they kind of have a tryst in the woods, and he kind of knows he's got a kid floating around, but he never sees him, and his mom kind of passes away tragically, and goes like, "Oh, your dad's out there," something, blah 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 blah, whatever. It kind of gets him to, get up off of his butt and leave the reserve sort of thing, as you speak. Um, and yeah, it's just I think Connor's a kind of lame character. He's got like the coolest assassin's gear get up in the series. I love the Native American inspired garb that's kind of turned into an Assassin's Creed feel. I think the design of Connor is maybe the strongest besides Ezio and Bayek from Origins. I just think the visual, like this, the stock standard kit of Connor's Assassin's Creed gear is super cool. So like every time you play as him, it's really fun because you look awesome doing everything. I love the incorporations of the skins and the pelts and the arrowheads and kind of like his Native American sensibilities of being a hunter and a tracker. Like everything should be like awesome in this game. That's why I feel so disappointed by it because the story has horrific pacing and uninteresting characters. Charles Lee is just a petulant pissant, and he becomes like your main enemy throughout the entire game. And he just sucks. He just sucks. And he's like your main focus throughout the game because of things he did to your village, your community, or whatever. Um, I just think it's a bummer. It's a missed opportunity, honestly, because Hatham really should have been the main thrust throughout the entire game, and kind of Charles Lee supplants him at some point. It becomes a less well-told story because of it. Um, but I just, ugh, it bums me out because the setting is perfect. The cameos, while you know they can maybe be seen as excessive, they're actually done really well. Um, and I think they make sense for the story they're telling and the period they're telling and the time they're telling it. It's kind of like the midst of the revolution for the most part against the British, and you're like literally you're literally part of the Boston Tea Party, just dumping tea in the river. It's so funny. Um, Pardon me. Um, and it's just uh, there's a lot of good things about this game, but I think the messiest part is just everything around the setting, the character, and the writing. I just think the writing is so poor in this game, so poor, and it could have been so good. And I think the structure of this game is just horrifically bad. It it is it is a point to point action game, but really it is a oh man, how do I explain this? It feels like a walking simulator sometimes. Like there are extracurriculars you can do because if you want to complete this game, it's going to take you a long, long time. I found out. Um, so there's time to do side stuff for sure. But I just, man, I just think the structure of the missions specifically are are uneven, poorly paced, especially a lot of like the main crime an Assassin's Creed mission can do is be like a stealth mission where you are trying to follow a target in a certain radius. So there's this like mechanic where you have to like eavesdrop on your target or whatever to kind of glean information, and you have to stay in this like cone of being able to hear what's going on. It's just this game does it so much. Or they put arbitrary timers on things and chase sequences, and if you don't do it exactly right the right way, and it's just ugh, it's horrible. The game design is terrible. There could have been such a good game there. Um, and the thing that's missing, I think, and it's kind of inherent to the setting, is that the verticality is missing. And it kind of has to not. It can't be as big of a focus because of you know it being kind of an upstart American setting. There's not tall buildings everywhere because it's just not like that. Um, American people didn't have the resources back then and the wherewithal to make skyscrapers and stuff or large chapels or anything like that. Like nothing like what Italy or what, Damascus or Jerusalem were offering up in terms of city and building architecture. So the game feels a little flat, literally, like ground flat. You feel a little more um, earthbound, um, for a better way of talking about it. And I think it's a bummer because of the setting, and it kind of has to be that way. And it's accurate to the setting that you don't have a lot of verticality. But they had an opportunity to do that with the wooded settings. Like there's a lot of times where you're going out into the woods and like hunting things, um, and it's just none of it really works. It feels like they could have done more with it. Because you're kind of running from tree to tree, shooting like a deer or something, or you get into a scrap with a bear on a ridge line, and you have to kind of worry about the geometry to make sure your back's not up against a wall, so you get killed and stuff. There are some interesting gameplay opportunities and situations you can kind of run into in those settings, but I don't know. It feels like part of a messier whole, and it could have been better. I just I think it fails at a lot. It's trying to shoot for the moon and ending up kind of barely touching the atmosphere. It's just there's a lot of interesting ideas that go nowhere in Assassin's Creed 3. Um, I think the biggest failing is just the main character is just not a good character. Connor could have been interesting. He is by far the most visually distinct and interesting of characters, but he's just not. He's not all there personally for me. So another thing, Assassin's Creed did a little bit and kind of became more of a thing in three is they kind of had parts of DLC and the downloadable content in Assassin's Creed 2 or was it Brotherhood? It might have been Brotherhood and Revelations where there was some downloadable content you could get on the Xbox Live Marketplace and the PS3 or the PSN store. Um, Stuff you could download to add to your games. Assassin's Creed 3 straight up drops an expansion, the Tyranny of King Washington, and I think it's the strongest part of the game, like in terms of whole. Like the structure is really fun. You play like a version of Connor that is kind of like this ravenous wolf man covered in pelts, trying to kill a literally Washington trying to take over America as its king. The story is kind of fanciful. It's more like Assassin's Creed 3 fanfic. It's really weird. It's kind of an excuse to just do wild stuff, but the gameplay is really fun. In Tyranny King Washington, you get like these spirit-born powers, where you're kind of jumping from like wolf powers, wolf spirit animal stuff, like bear rushing and using like bird powers and stuff. It's really cool. I really dig that. It feels like a stronger aspect of Connor's character that wasn't examined the way it should have been um, in the original game, the base game. Um, it doesn't save it at all by any means, but Tyranny of King Washington is really good. I don't think you should play it like first or anything. You should probably play three if you want to play the DLC. But yeah, the game is just not amazing. I wish it were way better than it is, and that honestly just bums me out. The the worst thing this game does is it just by the end you just don't care. And that's a bummer because everything about that game seems designed to like make you care. Just the execution is shoddy all around. All around, that game is not a good game. And completing it, which I also did, is a pain because it is the glitchiest Assassin's Creed there has ever been and ever will be. Well, besides Unity, that is a different story. But Assassin's Creed 3 has like crazy things it asks of the player to complete it in terms of trophies or whatever, um, trophy hunting, achievement hunting, whatever you want to call it. It it's just a pain. It took me 97 hours to finish everything, and it's not because it's a big game. It's just like I was getting so many things happen to me, like so many issues would crop up, or I would get to this portion of the homestead, which is like a big part of like completing Assassin's Creed 3, and like the thing I was looking for was not there because like there was a glitch happening, and I had to like reinstall the game and or take it off the game, take it off the console and reinstall, and it's a mess, man. It's just a mess, and I think that must have been the original release of it. I don't know, but yeah, all around Assassin's Creed 3 is a disappointing product. I just really think it is. It could have been it could have been half as long and still been pretty good. But the thing that should should be its strongest strength, which is its character, its indigenous character, is not. He's nothing to write home about. He's the worst character in the series, in my opinion. Um, Assassin's Creed 3, you should play it if you're into Assassin's Creed, but don't make it a priority or anything. I think the setting is very cool, but it doesn't do much with it personally. So, what I mean by the pivot of the metagame is that, you know, Desmond, his story ends in 3. I'm not going to get into it, but The pivot kind of manifests in Black Flag, which is the next one of the series, which is Black. It's Assassin's Creed 4 Black Flag. So it is a proper numbered sequel to Assassin's Creed 3. Um, and 3 is really good. I like, or not 3, sorry, 4 is really good. It's such an improvement over 3. There's ship combat now. 3 introduced it a little bit with the Aquila. It's not like that fleshed out. You do some naval missions here, there, and you kind of like dip your toe in the pond that is sailing. But Assassin's Creed 4 is kind of like all about it. Before I get into it, just the metagame stuff. Like the pivot of 3 to 4 is really weird. They never have really regained their footing on that front, in my opinion. So the events of 3 happen, and they the game ends, whatever. And then you kind of come back in 4 as an Abstergo employee and an unnamed one, and it becomes first person, and it becomes like this like I don't even know. It's just like an exploration sort of meta narrative exercise. You're kind of wandering around Abstergo's offices, which is kind of transmogrified into a video game company where they're making game. They kind of become just Ubisoft. It's really weird. It's a weird meta contextual thing um, to do. Like Abstergo becomes Abstergo, like the game company, and I think it's just as a cover to mine the assassins' histories or whatever. I mean, that's almost certainly what it is. But it's just really odd. It just feels like it feels very Ubisoft to be like, hey, we made a game about us. It's really weird. The one thing it doesn't show, if you were going to talk about Ubisoft, it doesn't show toxic culture or, crunch or anything like that, or sexual deviancy or anything like that. Like Ubisoft really is. So, I don't know. The meta narrative stuff in 4 is uninteresting. It is like I'm straight up like not even invested by that point. Even the story, I couldn't even tell you how it shakes out. They started doing some weird stuff with like meta narrative characters where like the head of Abstergo Games in 4 is like a target, I think, in Watch Dogs. It's really weird because like Watch Dogs is kind of a part of the Assassin's Creed franchise and vice versa, but they don't really talk to each other like that. So there's like little hints here and there. There's not like assassins really in Watch Dogs or Watch Dogs 2 or 3 that I've seen. Um, but yeah, it's odd. The entire idea that Abstergo is kind of like a Ubisoft mirror image is really funny to me. It's very meta. It's extremely meta. I don't know what they were thinking by doing it. It's not an engaging narrative. There are some recurring characters from the previous 1, 2, 3, Ezio trilogy, all that. Your main Assassin's Creed is kind of back on the job at Abstergo, trying to find out what there is to find out about things, and you're kind of being told what to do by these people, like you have in the past. You're kind of like unlocking these security locks, and there's like this mysterious guy that gets on your comm and goes like, I know what's really going on here, man, and stuff like this. It's all over the place. It's just all over the place as an idea, as a concept. I don't understand why they even made it, because you know going forward they don't even really do this again to this degree. It's really really odd. It's so odd. Um, but anyway, the interesting part of this game is the assassins part, which is kind of how it is going forward. Is everything is more interesting in the actual playing of the games as the assassins. Um, but you play Edward Kenway, like I mentioned previously. Edward Kenway, he's basically a pirate, a brigand, you know, the worst person you could think of. Um, and like I said he kind of falls into the whole assassins thing. He's not an assassin. He doesn't get trained as one, nothing. And it's more of a romp. I mean, it's just kind of like a fun Pirates of the Caribbean themed Assassin's Creed game. It's not even really about assassins. It feels like they wanted to make a pirate game and they threw the Assassin's Creed logo on it to kind of get people interested and add to the franchise. That's kind of what I mean when I say that Ubisoft is very experimental about their games. Like they want to try something out and they just kind of blow it up, and start an idea in Assassin's Creed game, and it's in an Assassin's Creed game. Um, and it's just, I don't know, man. It's a weird thing to have happen. They just wanted to make it a pirate game, and they call it Assassin's Creed. That's really what happens. So they kind of shoehorn the Assassin's narrative in there. There's like this thing you're trying to get. There's like this observation thing. It doesn't matter really. Like it's some old first civilization crap. The fun part is you rubbing elbows with like Blackbeard and Anne Bonny and all that stuff. There's some really fun characters here and there. Stede Bonnet's one of my favorite characters in the series, if not this game. Um, but yeah, it's kind of like an evolution of parts of three, but really of Revelations, where it's the counter-based gameplay. It is a way, way bigger open world where you're traveling from island to archipelago in a boat. The Jackdaw, which is upgradable. I am a sucker for upgradable vehicles in games. I love it when you do stuff like that. Building your bike in Days Gone to outfitting your car, the ultimate thing, ultimate pinnacle of a vehicle is Mad Max, in my opinion. And kitting out your beautiful vehicle with all manners of parts in that game is great. I could talk forever about Mad Max. I probably will one of these days. But anyway, Assassin's Creed, um, up to this point, there's only been one instance of using a boat in the game, and that in any of the games, and it was three with the Aquila. But with the Jackdaw, you're literally going from island to island. They kind of blew out the open world and put kind of water in between the land masses, which is really cool. It feels very I don't know. It feels seamless. Like there's not a lot of loading back and forth, which is really cool. Which is honestly really impressive for a game that came out almost, yeah, I think it was 10 years ago at this point. That it's so seamless. I think the water still looks really good. The it's aged kind of. The models aren't the sharpest things in the world or whatever, but I think the thing that really carries it is the buoyancy of the story. It feels like a fun pirate romp, and the main character of Edward is really great. I think he's voiced fantastically by he played Constantine in the NBC like short-lived season of television. I forget what his name is, like Matt something or other. I have the internet now. I could just look this up, but I just he's a great he does a great voice performance. I think he did the mocap for it as well, which is really cool. Um, I'm gonna look up this guy's name because it's driving me nuts. So we'll go to his Edward IMDb. Anyway, Matt Ryan, that's his name. I should have remembered that because that's the name of the old Atlanta Falcons quarterback. I don't know why I didn't remember that. It's so funny. But yeah, he does a great performance as Edward Kenway, and he's got this kind of like kind of nasty swagger to him. He kind of starts off as this hapless bum, really kind of drinking himself away. Um, the whole thing about him being a pirate is he kind of gets bored of his life, which is really kind of a bummer because he has like a wife and a kid. He just kind of like leaves to be a pirate, and she's like, "Oh my God, write to me, this and stuff, this and that." It's just I don't know. It's kind of a flimsy start, but whatever. Do they need reason back in the day to become a pirate? I don't think so. Um, it's kind of a bummer that happens. I can kind of sympathize being a dad and going like, man, that would suck if I left my kid, my wife. Um, he seems like he had a good time. I don't know. Edward Kenway looks like he was having fun. But yeah, you kind of meet Blackbeard and Anne Bonny and all that, all the old pirate favorites. I just think it looks great. It plays fantastically. It's that counter-based combat. You actually do have guns for sure in this one. And there's a lot of like customization options in terms of your ship and your outfit. There's a lot you can do. There's a lot of like hunting and crafting opportunities where you're making better things for yourself. Like, oh, I can hunt this jaguar and I get this pelt and I can make a jaguar suit, or I can, hunt this fish or whale or whatever, and I can make this ammo pouch. It's really cool. Like everything feels very cohesive in terms of a world cohesiveness. Um, I love Black Flag. It's great. It just doesn't feel like an Assassin's Creed game, and that's fine. It really is. It just feels like a pirate game. You know, I think if you're going to drop in anywhere without kind of getting into a wider narrative, Black Flag's probably the way you should go. You can totally ignore the metagame stuff. I just think it's lame as all hell. Um, but Black Flag really soars with its, like I said, its buoyancy. It's just a fun, lighthearted time. Um, and I really like that game. There's with the pivot, with the changes in direction, things kind of really change in the Assassin's Creed series from here on out. Things start developing quicker. There's become annual releases. There is you know a lot of crunch in the game industry. A lot of they're not being after Black Flag. They don't become good stewards of their franchise, I believe, with rare exception. Um, from Black Flag, we kind of pivot to the redheaded stepchild of the series, besides three, which I think three is kind of like that for a lot of people, especially myself. Um, you kind of have the double whammy of Rogue, Assassin's Creed Rogue, and Assassin's Creed Unity. Um, I will get into Rogue first because Unity is kind of a bag of worms. So Assassin's Creed Rogue is really the only one you don't play as an assassin, which is kind of a misnomer. They should have called it like I don't know Templar Screed or something like that. I don't know. You don't play as an assassin. You play as like an ex-assassin named Shay Cormac, and it's basically just like Black Flag 1.5. It's very similar. You pilot your own ship. It's smaller. They're doing a lot of the open world stuff. I like the setting. It's like a snowy setting. I think Shay is a pretty decent protagonist. He has reason enough for kind of his motivations. He gets kind of like I don't know. He gets in a quarrel with like his assassin's cell, and I don't know. There's a lot of reasons to sympathize with him and his plight. I feel like there's like returning characters from three here in Rogue, which is interesting. There's a lot of returning characters, including Adewale, which is great. I love Adewale. He's one of the best characters. He's on. I probably should talk about this before I continue on. He's in the DLC Freedom Cry, which is Assassin's Creed Black Flag DLC, which also became a standalone game too. And it's just more of Assassin's Creed 4 with Adewale, who's great. I wish he had his own open world game, like complete, so you can kind of run around with him. Um, but he kind of meets his end at the hands of Shay. Not to give too many spoilers, but he meets his end at Shay's hand, and he kind of kills a lot of assassins because he's a Templar. He has a really interesting gameplay. Like he doesn't have a hidden blade, so he kind of has a lot of different tools he uses. In terms of mechanics front, it's a different way to play an Assassin's Creed game. Um, you're using a lot of weapons, a lot of guns, a lot of um, long range things, um, a lot of underhanded tactics to kind of get your way through. It's weird to see the shoe on the other foot, like you're playing a Templar. I wish more of the games did that, having that, you know, different perspective. Because the assassins and Templars, they're kind of two sides of the same coin, where assassins want to like, what is it? They have their creed is literally everything is permitted. Um, nothing is something or other sacred or something like that. Um, they believe freedom should be for all, and people shouldn't, want to be ruled, sort of thing. And Templars, they want to, of course, subjugate the world and bend it to their will, sort of thing. They'll never, they say that, but like, I don't know. The way Rogue lays it out seems like it could make some sense. It's more sympathetic, but the entire nature of the Templars is kind of like, oh, these are the bad guys. So you can't go too far and agreeing with them because they're kind of like you know, they want to be a monarchy or whatever, with one figurehead at the top. But yeah, Rogue is just really well. It's a good game. It's like the best 7 out of 10 game in the series. Like it's fun to play. Also platinum that. I platinumed that like really quickly. I was recovering from what was it? I think I had my gallbladder out. Not to be too TMI. Um, but I was recovering from surgery, and I think I like started and finished that game, including platinuming it, and within a week because I was laid up, I did nothing. And then from there, I kind of segued straight over into Origins, which is really funny because Origins is an even longer game. But I was just like on an Assassin's Creed kick, I guess. I was like, oh, I loved it so much. What else can I play? You know, 'cause I was trying to keep up with it. Um, but yeah, there's not much to say about Rogue. It feels just more like Black Flag. It's a lot more Black Flag. It's definitely worth playing. It's also another one of those standalone things. You don't have to necessarily play 3 or 4 to get your head around what Rogue is trading in. But you know, if you're gonna play it, I would play the others for sure. It's a relatively standalone experience. It shares characters and mythos from the other games, but it's a different look at the struggle because you're usually vouching for the assassins because you're fighting for their cause, but having that be a different faction that you're playing as, it's really interesting. I wish they did more with that. I wish they showed a more sympathetic side to the Templars. Like, why do you hate them so much? Like, people are people. There's more nuance to that, I think personally. But you know, the whole subjugation thing's not great. But Shay really, he doesn't believe in that 100%. He's a little too like, I don't know. He feels like a conservative Templar. It's really weird. He's like, I don't know if I want to do all that. I'm kind of an assassin at heart. I just don't. I got into a tiff with them really, and I'm kind of looking for revenge, sort of thing. That's kind of the main crux of it. Um, he he's not like the most distinct looking assassin. He kind of just looks like a guy with a ponytail. I think he's Irish. The voice acting is really good for him. I like that. It's very accurate. And then, like I said at the beginning, talking about this, I like the vibe of the game. It's very like snow based, very icy. You're kind of one of the main uh, side quests has you like I think you're attacking a ship in like the Arctic, and there's like a bunch of narwhals jumping up around, and there's big ships you're kind of shooting down. It's really cinematic and fun. Feels like a fun like Arctic adventure in some ways. But yeah, that's basically Assassin's Creed Rogue. It's nothing to write home about. It's a very solid Assassin's Creed. It's one of the most solid Assassin's Creeds. If I could see anything out of the series, I would want to move away from the Assassins in some way and see more of the Templar plight. I really want to see because they can, you know, every side has an interesting story. I think they could tell a really good, compelling tale if they decided to tackle a different one. Um, so yeah, there's that. The real issue with talking about Unity is that there's a lot to it. So bear with me as I kind of muddle through it. It came out alongside Rogue, I think on the same day. I'm like 95% sure that it came out on the same day. And it was not in a state to be played. And this kind of is Ubisoft's issue nowadays where they're just not finishing games 100%. And so they come out shoddy. And when your game is needing reviewed, it's going to reflect on it that it wasn't up to snuff necessarily. And that's kind of what happened with Unity. People wrote it off because it was kind of a mess. Like at launch, there's like these old Kotaku articles of like faces where these eyeballs are bulging out and teeth are kind of like separating from the model, creating these like horrible looking characters and glitches from launch week of Assassin's Creed Unity. It's gotten so bad, and you know, time for my talk about Giant Bomb minute where they have Game of the Year 2014, I think it is, where they talk about the shortcomings of Unity and how bad it was, like most disappointing game sort of thing. Because coming off of the heels of 4, people liked 4 a lot, but like Unity was supposed to be like the first like this is the next gen, baby. This is the PS4. This is the Xbox One. We're making a brand new gen, Assassin's Creed game. We're not putting this on the old gen. Rogue was a tandem gen. It was a tandem release for old consoles and new consoles. Unity was like only new stuff at the time. And Black Flag released on 360 later came to PS4 and Xbox One and all that stuff. So Unity, in terms of like hype, in terms of what people wanted, they thought Unity was the new hotness. And there was a lot of interesting mechanics and ideas that kind of borrowed from the original in some way, where you're doing a lot more blending, you're doing a lot more methodical scoping out, a lot more free form exploration in Unity. Because the setting is France. We'll start there, and you play as Arno. Um, mm, Besides Connor, maybe my least favorite protagonist. We'll get into it. Um, but yeah, it's very it's very faithful to the original mindset of Assassin's Creed being this kind of open world sneaking sim, third person, stealth game. Because basically, like, you get to, like, for instance, there's like a whole Notre Dame section of this where you're trying to like take out a target or follow somebody, and there are different points of ingress into Notre Dame itself. But outside of Notre Dame is like a riot happening, because the French always want to revolutionize everything. They go like, "Oh my God, taxes are up. We're gonna revolutionize this and that, whatever." You get the gist. French people, I love the French. I love French fries, but they like to have their revolutions, don't they? Anyway, they're rioting, and you're trying to get into this place to, fight and kill this guy. And it's very like Assassin's Creed 1 that way, where it's like, hey, choose your way in. Go do this, do that. Um, the shortcoming is the story. I just don't think it's very good. It is. I remember being shocked about how good it looked because up to this point I hadn't had a next gen console. I actually played it at my friend's house. Um, I only had 360, so when I saw Unity for the first time, I was like blown away to see a high res 1080p video game for the first time. I remember remarking, you know, at the time going, what am I looking at? Like, this game looks so good. And I was talking to my friend who had a, I think it was, did I play? I think, yeah, I played it on Xbox One initially. I was like, do you realize how good this looks? Because I was playing on like 720p Xbox 360 for years. And he was like, yeah, it looks fine. Like, why are you making such a big deal? I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like, I am playing on old stuff and I've had old things for a while. This was the yeah, this is the second year of the PS4 Xbox One lifestyle or life cycle, I should say. And I hadn't gotten one yet, and I was begging for one, begging for one. I just hadn't gotten it yet. I ultimately wouldn't get one until the next year, where I bought it for myself, starting my new job for the first time. I bought a PS4 at that point. But well, we bought a family Xbox One, but I never played like Assassin's Creed or anything else on it, and we were still playing, genuinely just playing 360 games on it, really, which is kind of sad. Um, but anyway, it's kind of like the new effort for that next gen sort of idea of Assassin's Creed, and just technically it just let people down on launch, and it got better as it went along, but like stability even now playing it, I recently finished it in the last couple of years. It's just not up to snuff still. It doesn't run extremely well. It's pretty congested because of the high NPC counts and many scenes of the game, especially that riot area that never thins out as the game goes along. It doesn't seem well optimized. It feels like it could use another pass, honestly. If they went back and did another patch of it, like they are doing, honestly, with Assassin's Creed Syndicate, which is really cool. They should do that with Unity. Um, Not getting into it really at all. The metagame is like zero to none. Like, you're not doing much of it at all. In fact, like, the only manifestation of that is in the Assassin's Creed story, with the Assassin's protagonist. Like, you're piloting Arno as he does these weird metagame events where someone's in your ear going like, "Oh my God, we got to get this artifact before this simulation collapses," this and that. But you're playing as Arno doing it, so you're not even a different party. Like, you're just Arno. You're this guy in the simulation. You don't even know what context for the simulation you have. You just have this lady talking to you or whatever. Um, but yeah, Unity. It's the story's not great. It still looks pretty good. It's not bad. The main thing they added for this was multiplayer assassinations, multiplayer running around. Like seamless multiplayer, that sort of thing. Their big E3 demonstration kind of focused on that, and in some ways, when it comes to technical stuff, it just didn't work at launch that much, and the game kind of was sour because of it. Like, people's perspective of it was sour. Um, and the thing is, they hinged so much of the game on that cooperative play and those they had bespoke missions that were like multiplayer focused, which is kind of one of the reasons I haven't completed it at 100% is because of those the need for having somebody else in those missions. Like you can do them by yourself, but they're really kind of hard and impossible to do by yourself. So you're encouraged to take people with you. Um, but yeah, Assassin's Creed Unity is it was a shoddy launch. The story I just don't think is very good. The characters are really weak. The impetus for you being a French assassin is flimsy at best, but it does have a really interesting like love angle in terms of the story. I gotta quit saying in terms. I'm driving myself crazy. Um, you you kind of have your love interest waffling back and forth being a double agent to your cause or to the Templars or something because her dad was pretty in deep with them and it's an interesting story. It's like the first real Assassin's Creed story involved. Ezio has a couple love interests here and there, and he meets his wife in Revelations. But in this one, it's kind of like integral to the story. What happens between the main character and the I forget what her name is, the kind of like Templar seductress lady. It's kind of like a Romeo and Juliet thing where they're they're not meant to be together, whatever you want to call it. But the things that were interested or that were you know the things that are interesting in this game are is the multiplayer, which ends up being fine later because they do a bunch of patches to it because it's a big budget video game they got to fix, because a lot of people have played it and own it. Um, and they kind of add new traversal capabilities where a lot of people kind of loved it, and I'm still kind of mixed on the movement of it. So up until now, you're kind of just you're holding the trigger down to run, which is kind of weird. You don't really usually do that in games. You kind of press down, but at least your thumb's free to kind of do what you need to in Assassin's Creed. And this, you do the same thing where you're kind of like triggers to kind of like start your locomotion, and then they in the old ones you're kind of using the jump prompt to scale walls, balance on beams, this and that. But in Unity, you're like using this up down function, which is interesting, but in practice it's a little clunky. I've seen people like completely school me in terms of parkour movement. So for the people that it works for great. Whatever, it's awesome. I just the mechanic stuff, they never brought it back in any of the other ones. It was only in Assassin's Creed Unity because they felt like it was still a little tricky. But some people just swear by that specific control scheme, and they even further simplify it in the RPGs really, where they kind of make you climb wherever you want and you can kind of go up and down at your leisure, and you don't have to like input a specific function to do either or. Um, but yeah, Assassin's Creed Unity, it's not like it's memorable for the setting, which I think is great. Um, the setting and the technical issues at launch for me. The setting wasn't great. The story's not great. The It has some of the most unsightly map barf in any video game. Like you pull up in that mini map and you blow it up into the full map. There's just icon crap everywhere. And I like an open world game. I like going and doing things in games. It's fun. But when it's like not even legible in your game, like what are you doing? It's a major issue that Unity has. It's just like the map legibility is low, is terrible. Like you just can't see what's happening. Um, like I mentioned in the other games, they have like the special costume that you get for doing like these you know fetch questy Where's Waldo sort of puzzles throughout your game playing time, and they give hints here and there to do it. Whatever you unlock it and get this cool set of armor that looks like Altair but with like a color swap to it. Um, but yeah, there's like a lot to do in Unity, even more than the other ones, and some of it's like weird Ubisoft store chests you can open and like multiplayer things. It's just like a messy like structure. You can't just straightforward get everything the way you want to. Like the way I play Assassin's Creed is I unlock all the viewpoints first, which opens up the map, and then you go do I'll go do the stuff after the story. That's the way I roll. And in this one, it's just like not like that. You could be in an area and there's a chest, and it's like, oh, you're out of lockpicks, which has never happened. There's never been a lockpicking system. Um, well, I think there was in Syndicate, but there hadn't been one like that um, up until that point. So like, there's just like weird resources you have to collect to do specific things to clear this map, and it's just I don't know. It's a messy, convoluted structure. I wish they would polish it better before going forward on it. But ultimately, Unity is a good game. It's just not my favorite. The DLC is not great. The Dead Kings DLC, you're kind of underground for like 85% of it, and that takes away a lot of the verticality of Unity specifically, where you're climbing everywhere, you're running everywhere, you're attacking and fighting on rooftops and stuff. This one is like, oh, I'm in a catacomb fighting you on a dirt floor. Like that's kind of lame. In the story of Dead Kings, is you chasing a kid everywhere. It sucks. It's not very good. You do get some cool garb in that one. Um, I just not a fan of Dead Kings. It's not very long. It's like 4 or 5 hours, but it's just not that good. It's just not that good. It's fine. Unity is a fine game. It's another 7 out of 10. Before they fixed all of that, it would have been a 4. Like it was unplayable the way it was. But Assassin's Creed Unity, worth your time. I would play it one of the last ones. It's just not very pertinent to anything Assassin's Creed, really. Uh, I just it's a totally fine playable game. Totally fine and playable. Um, from there, from Unity, it goes to Syndicate, which is kind of like their next crack at like Unity a little bit. Um, it's a very similar structure, but there's different protagonists. There's like it's the first time they've done a dual protagonist, and they kind of gesture at that with some of the RPG ones, but they don't actually do it in practice like they do here in Syndicate. I love Syndicate. It's one of my favorite ones, honestly. It's super underrated. It takes place in London. The setting's great. It's a lot of verticality, you can climb Big Ben, whatever you want to do. But you play as these twins, Jacob and Evie Fry, and they're just cool. They're cool people. I think Evie is just like the brains of the bunch, and Jacob's kind of like the muscle. But they run this game, or the gang called the Rooks. I think they're called Rooks, and they're like trying to take over these boroughs of London. It's really fun. It feels very Peaky Blinders to me. Um, it also, like, in terms of combat, it has some of the most brutal finishes of any Assassin's Creed game where, I know you're killing people left and right, but you are beating the absolute crap out of people. Like, you are just completely walking people down and slugging them. It's insane, some of the counter combos you can do in Syndicate. Um, I was just like, I would 80 hours in when I was finishing it, I was like, man, that still looks painful. That is messed up. Like to the point where like Evie's got this cane, so she like uses that to attack people, and she like takes the knife out of her cane, stabs somebody in the back with it, puts like the haft of it in somebody's throat and like shoves the knife in his head, and it's just like brutal stuff. Or Jacob like bare knuckle boxes this guy, kicks him in the nuts, and then just suplexes him. Like stuff is crazy in Syndicate. I think the story is excellent, it's really good. The DLC is great. The Jack the Ripper stuff and the Maharaja stuff is really good. Um, it's just a solid game all around. It's more of the same when it comes to structure. It's very like Unity in that way. One of the best traversal features in it though is this grapple hook. It has a really fun grapple hook. It's not as versatile as you'd want it to be. You can't just throw it out anytime you want. You kind of have to have a roof to roof point to sling at it, or you can use it to scale buildings in a single like a zip line, which is really cool. It takes kind of the busy work out of climbing a lot of places though, which is a little bit of a bummer. But it is limited enough so you're not using it all the time. Um, but yeah, I think the writing is really strong. It feels buoyant like Assassin's Creed 4 was for its characters, where it just doesn't take itself very seriously. There's like little to no meta narrative in this. Later, it gets into Evie Fry's kid with Henry Green. I think his name is Henry Green. And she does some like interesting World War One stuff. It's like it's the closest they have to a metagame in that one in Syndicate. this just it became de-emphasized for a couple games, and it was really weird because you don't quite know what's happening. But it comes in like bigger force later, where they make their real pivot into the meta layer, and it's just not it's not a direction I think they should keep going. Um, but yeah, I think Syndicate's great. It has a great like a movable hub. Like you have this train car and it's like your like base of operations. It's really cool because it like keeps moving, so you can't really nail it down from time to time. If you're like if you're trying to escape the cops, you can kind of see where the train's at in your map, and you hear it in the distance. You're like, oh my god, I can escape! And I'm just gonna jump on this thing as it passes, and it's really exhilarating for that. Um, it also has like they really fixed the mission structure in Syndicate. It's not so much of like eavesdropping and time limits here and there. It's it's more straightforward, um, objective based design. But it just feels like they cut out a lot of the crap of the other ones, especially Unity and three. Three is like the worst for all of that. It's like the advent of the eavesdropping sort of mini game sort of thing. It has it in two and Brotherhood and stuff, but it's not as in your face or horrible as the as that original you know it's kind of feature creep, honestly. Like they just went like, oh, we want to add this eavesdropping feature into these old games, and it's just it got worse and worse until it got better. Honestly, they kind of fixed all the problems in Syndicate all at once, and it came out great too. It came out very sharp. Syndicate had some problems, but the console versions were really excellent of that game coming out of the box. Um, yeah, Syndicate's great if you want that Peaky Blinders flavor. It's very like rough and tumble Victorian England um, type of type of jaunt through the Assassin's Creed mythos. It's another one of those games that feels really standalone, and that's what I kind of like about this game. These games is that you can dip in and out at intervals, like with Rogue and this and Four. It's a lot of like, hey, I'm gonna play this a little bit, and if you're interested in the full mythos, I would play the Ezio trilogy for sure. Um, but like I said earlier, this is the pivot. This is the pivot of the series. People were kind of like tired of this formula, so Syndicate didn't and coming off of you know the technical mess that was Unity, Syndicate just didn't sell as well as Unity, I believe. I'm pretty sure that's right. And people just weren't as stoked about it. Um, so they felt like they needed to make a change. Their formula was stale, whatever. They decided to take a year off because these games were annualized for a long time, ever since Assassin's Creed 2, I think, or maybe it was Brotherhood. They made them annual releases, very Call of Duty esque. So like Death or Taxes, a new Call of Duty was going to come out, a new Assassin's Creed was come out, and it was comforting to kind of know that in some way. Um, but this was the pivot point, and personally, I think it's one of the best games they've ever made as a studio, as a company. Assassin's Creed Origins is the first in their RPG set Assassin's Creed games. It's very like it feels like Ubisoft played Witcher 3 and went like, we need to make that, and it kind of is that. Um, I think everything about that game is excellent, from the story, the character, the writing. It's just, man, the setting especially. It takes place in ancient Egypt, um, with Cleopatra and Marcus Aurelius and all this stuff, and it's really fun. It's really well done, but it's very serious. It's a very sober game. It is maybe the most brutal of any of them in terms of story and character and how people are affected by events happening in a given setting and story. You play as Bayek, who's basically like this like desert cop called a Medjay. So he kind of has a reason for doing all these odd jobs, which is really funny. But his story is just so strong, and I think the performance by Abu Bakr Salim is just immaculate. It's perfect. It's one of the best portrayals of a character in any form of media. I just think Bayek is up there with some of the greats, like with Arthur Morgan and Ezio and Joel from The Last of Us. Like in terms of male protagonists. He is fantastic. He is he's the ride that the series takes on. Like or the game. It's getting late. My words are getting kind of muddled. I've been writing and talking for a long time. But anyway, the gist is Bayek is the heart and soul of this game. He is so much fun as a character. He is so passionate, so driven. The thing that happens in this game is so heartbreaking. You really feel for him and his plight, and it feels justified that he wants revenge against these people. Um, the pivot that was made is the RPG nature of it, but it's also the idea that it goes way back in the past, even before the Assassins and the Templars even existed. So you just have this kind of cult-like presence that are the early proto version of the Templars kind of hanging around. And that's kind of why you're going on this quest to avenge your fallen son. I mean, your son dies. I mean, it's kind of the crux of the game, so I kind of have to spoil it. But you and your wife are aggrieved. Your wife Aya, which you play as in certain intervals, you're aggrieved parents, and at the time I could not, quite understand what that would feel like. Now I can't even imagine how I would feel, having had a child now and being a parent. It just that would be crushing to me to see something like that happen. Um, but as a first effort for the RPG nature of Assassin's Creed, it's just really it's for a first effort, it's shocking how good it is. Really, the open world is so fun. All the things they have you do is great. All these side quests are really fun. You, like I said, you're kind of like Egyptian cop. You're kind of going up to people, going like, "What's going on? Can I help you with something?" The combat is completely revamped. It's very, it's no longer really counter based. It's just kind of it's hacky slashy. There's not a lot of thought to put in it. It's very like cooldown and meter focused. There's some light armor and shield sort of wearing things. There's like it feels like you're leveling a little bit. It's not like out and out leveling, but it's very light touch in terms of RPG mechanics from a leveling aspect. But I almost don't want to talk that much about this game. I just think you should play it, and I don't think you need any other game to play it. Um, it's a very standalone sort of thing. Um, I just think it's the best story in the series, best story, one of the best stories in video games. And it's a run up to release. The You Want It Darker Leonard Cohen trailer of this game is just so awesome. Oh, I watch it from time to time. It's like a CG cinematic announced trailer for Assassin's Creed Origins, and it's just so good, so good. If you want to invest in a game that's not going to waste your time, play Origins. Everything about it, including the DLC, especially the DLC, the hidden ones. Oh man, I could just talk for hours about how much I love the hidden ones DLC. Everything about Bayek and his character are wrapped up beautifully in the hidden ones. Um, I think the other DLC is the Curse of the Pharaohs, maybe. Anyway, it's a more fantastical take on the mythos of Egyptian gods and stuff. Like you're fighting a bunch of godlike creatures, and it's very like Assassin's Creed 3 with the Tyranny of King Washington. It feels more fantastical. It's not like quite fanfic like that is, but it is interesting. You are going to another place. It feels like you are Bayek, and you're encountering these supernatural forces, which is really interesting. But yeah, the Hidden Ones DLC they're just it's a fantastic game. Every person that likes open world games should play that game. I just think it's a fantastic time. A great setting, great characters, amazing writing, so good, just amazing writing. Bayek is the best realized character, best assassin, hidden one, whatever you want to call it, in this series besides Ezio. And I think he does more in a game than Ezio does in three, and it's kind of to do with the structure. But I think at his core, I think Bayek is a better character than Ezio. But it's close. It's close. I have a lot of affection for Ezio as an assassin. Um, I don't even want to talk that much more about Origins. The thing that kind of inspired me to talk about this topic, and this is where I'm going to end. I don't know how long this particular one's going to take because I've already gone at length, an hour 40 at this rate. I'm trying to keep these crash courses tight. Dang it! But I was worried that this would happen. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. Oh man, I my journey with this game was kind of ebbed and flowed. I never really got into it. I I I, I played 20 hours of this game, right, with Alexios, and I hated that character so much and that performance so much. I literally deleted that save and started a new one as Cassandra. It's been kind of a rocky road, my relationship with this game. I just finished it this year. Like this is recent. This is in the last couple of months. I I put 160 hours into this game. I did everything you can do in this game. All the DLC, all the trophies, every part of the map has been cleaned up. I sucked this game dry. Dry. There is nothing left. And I hated it. A lot of it. It's disappointing to me. It's very like Black Flag, where they kind of wanted to make a Greek epic, but they had to make an Assassin's Creed thing, you know? It's just, oh man, they should just make new series for new games. I don't understand why they have to make everything Assassin's Creed. They could just make a new thing and I would play it probably. But anyway, where to start with this thing? This thing is a massive, massive game, like a beast, and it just feels like one of those live service games, but like not. It's like a single player live service, and that's how Valhalla plays a little bit. Again, I haven't finished Valhalla, but you're doing all these random things Ubisoft provides in those games as single player. Like there's like a special type of currency you can only get by doing specific things, and they have like the Ubisoft store in like the main menus and stuff, and there's just like a bunch of weird things like that. Um, when it comes to Odyssey that wasn't even in Origins. Origins feels like a very like in a vacuum. We made an RPG sort of Assassin's Creed. You like it, you don't, you don't. Odyssey is kind of like, hey, we should try to monetize things. So there's like a whole extra store where you can buy like cosmetics for like Helix credits and stuff. It's so dumb. Um, but they have this like essential piece in that store where it's like this leveling boost, and you kind of have to have it, or you're going to be grinding for hours on a level just to get max, you know. And I just think it sucks. Like their entire like live servicification of a single player game is frankly disgusting to me. So that might have been a lot of my disdain for this, but I think it just has to do with I felt like this game just wasted my time. Wasted my time. I spent hours and hours clearing this map. And you know, video games they might be just a waste of time, whatever. I enjoy doing it. I just think this game just has no concept for pacing or runtime. And it's so frustrating to play a game for as long as you have and end up not and coming away with not appreciating or liking any really part of it. I think the protagonist can be cool, but she's so it's a split protagonist this time. So you play as either Alexios or Cassandra. So the one that you choose, the other sibling kind of plays a different role in the story as kind of your foil, which is an interesting thing they have not done. Instead of playing as two characters, you're still playing as one, but you see that sibling reflected in later things down the road. Anyway, it's just the quality between Cassandra's voice acting and Alexios is like an ocean. I just think Cassandra's just better in every conceivable way. Alexios is a mess. I just think the VO is just subpar, and I wouldn't want to play that game any other way. If I had played as Alexios going forward, just in my regular playthrough, I don't think I would have finished it. I'm just going to be completely honest. I think Cassandra is a better, more nuanced, more realized take of the Misthios character. The kind of, you know, they give nebulous titles to people that want to do odd jobs, like the Medjai or the Misthios. Like, hey, you're walking around here, go collect this for me, person. I'll pay you drachmi, you know, the currency of whatever. Oh man, I have so many thoughts about this game, and I don't want to talk about it that much at length, but I kind of Assassin's Creed Odyssey could have been great. It could have been excellent, but there's just too much of it. There's so much of it, and by the end of the game, I'm skipping dialogue just to get through it, and I don't find their side quests interesting. Any of their characters interesting. I find some of them flat out annoying, like Socrates. He's so annoying. Or the people on your boat, Barnabas and um, uh, Herod, what's his name? Herodotus, something like that. Herodotus, whatever you call him. She likes to put a little Greek inflection on everything, which is fun. It's a great performance by that voice actress for Cassandra. But yeah, just there's no likable characters. The story is just oh, I'm basically the reincarnation of the god of Sparta, not like actually, but as Leonidas. I'm like his descendant, and I have to rise up the ranks and you know investigate my family's dealings with this cult that becomes the Templars later, and it's a nothing story. It has some okay, so like in terms of like a broad view, it has a lot of far-reaching consequences, especially in the DLC for like stuff to come. But I just don't think any of it's good. Like I just think it's such a waste of your time. I I don't recommend this game. I just don't. I think Origins is a better game for the RPGs front. Odyssey is like bigger in every way, from leveling to gear to breadth and depth of world. It's just there's just so much of it, and this might have been something that I didn't like because I was playing at such a steady clip. I don't know. I don't know. It's such a bummer. The game never truly grabbed me after 160 hours, and it's my fault for putting it in there. I just was. It was one of those things where I got so into it. I'm like, you know what? I'm in for a penny, in for a pound. I'm in this thing. I need to just see it through, you know. And having done that, I came away empty. I did everything. I've never I've never wrung a game this dry. And I'm not being facetious. I can't think of another game that I did this for to this extent. Mad Max probably. Open world games, I kind of like them. They're fun, easy romps. But this one is just the DLC has consequences for the meta narrative that I don't care about, and um, I just find it exhausting. I was exhausted by the end of Assassin's Creed Odyssey. There's a lot of people prefer it over Origins. I just don't. I just think those people are wrong. It's fine. We live and we learn. But Odyssey it's another romp like thing. It just doesn't feel like an Assassin's Creed game. You barely even use your hidden blade. Um, you know, equivalent. It's not even so. It's not a hidden blade. It's like this broken spear of Leonidas becomes your like stabby tool. But one of the main things they changed in this game is, as compared to the others, is like this is in Origins as well. The RPGs, there's no instant kill on a stab to the back, which there was in every other game previous to Origins, and that's a kind of a big no-no. Like for me, that's like one of the core tenets of that series. So now like you can overpower an enemy by doing a certain attack while they're not looking, and it'll chop up more of their health bar or whatever. But mm, it's just they basically like if you want to get up beside somebody and gank them, stab them in the back, it does like half a health bar, and you're like, what are we doing? This is a kill. This is a kill. In every other game, this is a kill besides Origins and this. And it's just I don't know why they changed that. It's such a core identity of Assassin's Creed to jump out of the bushes and stab some fool instantly without having to worry about a health bar. Maybe this is old man yelling at Cloud. I don't know. I like the classic formula better anyway. But I just the decisions they decided to make with Odyssey in a lot of ways, from length to story to character. I just think it's just not very good. It's not a very good game. It's just it wastes your time ultimately. If you wanted to see everything in it like I did, just touch grass or something. Just do something else. I just don't think it's worth your time. And I played every bit of it. I did all the DLC. which is broken up into chapters, so it's a pain to even get through. I did everything in that DLC, all the main story quests, all the trophies. Um, I've seen both sides of the coin. I played a lot of Alexios. I played 20 hours of Alexios. I've done a lot of this game for a long time. This has been a long time coming. I bought this game years ago. I had only finished it this year. So, puts in perspective kind of like it not grabbing me. But if you're going to play an RPG, just play Origins. Origins is just so much better. It's just so much better in every way. Um, for the boat stuff, there's a lot of boat stuff in um, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, but a lot of it feels pretty perfunctory. You kind of just use it to go back and forth. And Black Flag, it felt very critical that you have a ship that you upgrade. And this one is kind of like, you can use it, you can upgrade it, whatever. There's a trophy for that. Do it, you know. Um, it just doesn't seem as big of a going concern in Odyssey. There's a little bit of that in Origins with Aya, some of the ship combat, but it's kind of like cinematic snippets where you play as a ship. You don't really do a ton of fighting as Aya in Origins. But to cap off the games I played, Assassin's Creed Odyssey. I could talk even more length about it. I'm exhausted thinking about it, and I'm exhausted for being how late it is. It's almost 2 o'clock my time. I just think Odyssey is just not a good game. I think I might do a check-in with Valhalla, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. Valhalla and Shadows. Shadows comes out in March. I'm not going to play them back to back or anything, but I think Valhalla is going to be like my hey, 2024 is over, 2025 is beginning. Here's a game to kind of sweat out the winter months, play this thing and figure it out. And I hear like if you didn't like Odyssey, you're not gonna like Valhalla because it's more the same. But I don't know. I just feel like the Greek setting really didn't grab me. It's a beautiful game. Don't get me wrong, and there is some verticality here and there, but I'm not in. I wasn't into it. I just wasn't into it that much. I would be happy to see a new setting. Um, honestly, I like Vikings. Vikings are cool. We'll see how that shakes out. Um, I guess to cap it off, I'll talk about Mirage, and I feel like I can't really do that well, having not played Valhalla. So I don't know how much I'll get into it. But Valhalla is a return to the old formula. It's kind of a step in the RPG direction in terms of your character, but in practice, when it comes to the playing of the game, the mechanics, it's very old Assassin's Creed. And you play as Basim, who is a character in Valhalla that I'm not that familiar with. We will see how it kind of wraps up. Um, but Mirage is just kind of like a middling Assassin's Creed game. I think Riz or not Riz Ahmed, what's his name? He's what's his name on Sonic. He's like the henchman to Eggman, whatever. That guy plays Basim, which is cool. The performance is good. The game is pretty fun to play. I think the combat's kind of busted, and I don't really like it, but traversal seems fine. It's a great looking game. It came out on PS5 and um, Xbox Series consoles last year, and I finished it. I haven't 100%ed it or anything like I do with most of them, but I've played that game. It's totally fine. It's serviceable. It's not something you need to buy, really. I feel like I honestly lost a lot of um, the gist of it because of me not playing Valhalla. So, you know, I'll remedy that at some point. I feel like I can't talk about Mirage as in depth as I want to until I do that. So, I'll probably get on that this winter. So, that is a crash course of just all the games, like what you should look out for, what I think about them in a broad view. I'm not getting into every one of them. There's a lot to talk about. If, like, for instance, Noah wants to play them, I'll play them again to kind of like talk about it, either here or there. I don't know. But for my exposure, that's my history with the series and what I think about pretty much every one of the games. I might, like I said, I might do a Valhalla check-in next year sometime. It's not really my concern. I it's not my concern right now. I'm kind of focused on this year's games and finishing those out because I have enough to play already. I really do. So yeah, this is a long crash course. I really didn't want it to be 2 hours, but it is 2 hours. It'll be 2 hours and 5 minutes probably by the time we're done. So enjoy. Take it into your weekend. Listen to it, savor it. If you need me to do anything specific, I will. to make the listening experience better. But I think we're finally getting the hang of you know putting these out weekly, um, a podcast or two. I think we're doing good work. I don't think I'll ever stay up this late again talking about a series I need to get really invested in because I feel like I am blinking major on a lot of stuff. So maybe in the hindsight of me listening to this, I'm gonna be like, why the hell did I say this? But it's fine. We'll figure it out. Yeah, this has been Stick Drift's Crash Course. I can barely talk now. I apologize. I've been Power Glover. You can also check out the Silent Hill review I put up on my Substack as well as the podcast feeds this past week. I really love that game. I think it's a masterpiece. I think you should play it if you like horror games or if you just like good games. So play that game, please, and let me know what you think. Um, yeah, I'm just playing a lot of playing a lot of 2024 games that are long. I'm in the middle of like a Metaphor ReFantazio. I'm staring at the barrel of a Persona 3 Reload playthrough. I'm kind of doubling up, and I don't know if it's going to cost me or not. So we'll see how it goes. I have a lot of small stuff I want to finish too, like Mouthwashing and Crow Country, all those games. But that's for the main pod. That's just kind of what I'm up to. Next week will be the main pod. Enjoy it when it comes out, and thank you for listening to this one. Appreciate you.